Oh, wasn't that cool? Rescue. I really like that line in the video where it said, "This rescuing brings out the best in humanity." And we saw some of those clips there. And as I was listening to Leanne talking about Cambodia, I just really believe that there's something in humanity, there's something that God has placed in us that has this urge to rescue people, to save people. And I don't know how many of you here have ever been on the receiving end of a rescue, or maybe you have delivered a rescue. And as I was thinking through the stories where I might have experienced rescue and where I have maybe rescued some people, it just made me think that maybe God has put inside of all of us this whole idea about rescue. As a matter of fact, the whole Bible, and we have in youth upstairs, we've been deep in the book of Revelation, and we've been going like 11 weeks in the book of Revelation up to chapter 11, and what is becoming very clear to us through the book of Revelation is that God's whole deal about humanity and about this world is all around rescue. And that he wants to rescue, but you have to allow yourself to be rescued. And then when he wants to rescue, he also wants to put in you the desire to rescue others. And this really is what the whole great controversy is about, this whole deal about good and evil is about rescue. And so this morning, I want to talk about rescue, and I just want to get straight into it. And I want to share a story from the Old Testament, and like Leanne said, from around 4,000 years ago. I want to share a brilliant rescue story that is in there. And the guy that did the rescuing, his name is Abraham. At the time, his name was Abram. And I just want to tell you, actually, before we talk about Abraham, how many people here like maps? Like whenever we talk about the Bible and we talk about these weird sounding places, for me, I always need to see a map. So we got some maps. Can we bring those maps up? Whenever we talk about the Bible and Bible stories in ancient times, and the whole Bible actually happens in this little part of the world. Like it's not long, it's not wide, it's not very big at all, but it all happens there. It's quite incredible. Back in the day, it was called Canaan. It's where Israel is today. So, just so you know where we are on the world map and where all the stories of the Bible kind of happen around there. Can we go to the next slide? There's also another place in the Bible that is mentioned a lot, and it used to be called Mesopotamia, which is Greek for between the two rivers. And the two rivers was the river Euphrates and the river Tigris, and it's where Iraq is today. And you can kind of see from the satellite map there that it's it used to be a lot more green and a lot more lush than it is today. But this place was called Mesopotamia, and it's where civilization began. And so when you hear about, kings coming from the east, or when you even hear about kings coming from the north, this is what we're talking about, the kings coming from Mesopotamia, from the civilizations of the world. And why were people in Mesopotamia so interested in a place like Canaan? Because it was like really small and really underdeveloped. Well, the reason they were interested in it was because if you can see that green shaded area there that kind of goes around in sort of like an arc, that was called the Fertile Crescent. And why that was important was because that's the way that people got into Canaan from Mesopotamia. So they wouldn't just cross straight over the desert because you'd die, right? And you couldn't do that. So you had to follow that Fertile Crescent around, and you'd come from the north and you could drop down into Canaan. And the reason why you want to come through Canaan is because everybody wanted to get to Egypt. And why did everyone want to get to Egypt? Well, because Egypt was the place to be. Egypt was like the United States. Egypt had all the power, had all the money, had all the trade. And so Mesopotamian kings in ancient times would follow the Fertile Crescent around. They'd come through Canaan, and they'd beat up anybody that was in their way. And then they'd drop into Egypt, try and conquer them, and then head on the way back. And so this gives you hopefully some context for our story that we're going to share. Have we got one more slide? No. Oh, don't worry about it because we're not... Oh, yeah. There it is. And so just taking a closer look, our story is going to take place. You see that blue kind of image there? That's the Dead Sea as it is today. And this is where our story takes place. So we just stay there for now, and then we'll go to the next slide when I kind of say. So Abraham. Who was Abraham? Abraham was an amazing dude. Abraham is mentioned over 300 times in the Bible, so he's kind of pretty important. Abraham is said to be the father of two great people the Jewish people, and the Arabs. He's the father of them, so that makes him pretty important. And he also is claimed to be the father of three great religions. He's the father of the Jewish religion. He's the father of the Christian religion, which is kind of us here. And he's the father of the Muslims, you know. When you count up, did you know that in this world, see, here's the deal about Abraham. The thing about Abraham was that God made him a promise, and God said, Abraham, one day you will be the father of many nations. And this was at a time when Abraham was like granddaddy, and Sarah, his wife, was like grandma, and she hadn't been able to have kids their whole married life. And God was making promises to Abraham saying, hey, don't worry about that. I'm going to make you the father of many nations. And Abraham was like, well, how's that going to happen? Like, it's just not happening. And today, there are 2.14 billion Christians in the world. Right? There are 1.4 billion Muslims in the world. And there are around 450 million Jewish people in the world. That accounts for 45% of the world's population. You see how amazing God is? God said, Abraham, you can't see it now, but one day you will be the father of 45% of the people that exist in 2014. Abraham's like, my wife can't even have babies. Like, I'm 80. Come on. God is amazing. So this is Abraham. So if you don't know who Abraham is, hopefully now you have an idea. And the story I want to share with you is found in Genesis chapter 13 and Genesis chapter 14. And if you want to check up on my recollection of the story, you can do that later, or you can do it now. It's up to you. But the story starts like this. I'll start from Genesis chapter 12. It's really interesting. Abraham has a father whose name is Terah. Sounds better. And Terah actually decides to leave Ur of the Chaldees, which is in Mesopotamia. We saw that before, and which is kind of Iraq today. And he decides to follow the Fertile Crescent around to get to Canaan. Unfortunately, he dies before he gets there, and Abraham carries on this journey. And Abraham takes his family and everybody, and they journey down into Canaan. Now, God said to Abraham, I want you to obey me. Anybody have a problem with obedience? Just me? Okay. I want you to obey me, and I want you to go to Canaan, because it's in Canaan that I'll make you a father of many nations, and it's a land flowing with milk and honey, and you'll love it. Trust me. So Abraham takes his family, and he goes into Canaan, and the first thing that he experiences is, guess what? Famine. Can you imagine? So Abraham is standing there with all his family. He's now the big leader because his dad has died, and he's going on God's promise. And he gets there and he goes, well, I'm here, God, and we're getting hungry. What's happening? You said this, and you said, what's happening? And so, without waiting for God to tell him what to do next, you know what Abraham did? He went down to Egypt. Now, here's the thing about the Bible. When you ever hear in the Bible this term of down, it's not just physically down, it's often spiritually down as well. For example, Jonah, he went down to Joppa, and then he went down to the boat, and then he went down to the bottom of the boat, and then he went down into the ocean, and then he went down into the whale. It's like down, down. When the Bible talks about down, it's just not physically down, it's also spiritually down. And Abraham, this great patriarchal faith, goes down to Egypt. Here's what happens on the journey. Okay, check this out. Don't know if you know this, but on the way down to Egypt, Abraham comes up to Sarah, his wife, and he says, you know, honey, you are incredibly beautiful. Now, I don't know how many ladies are here that whenever the man in their life says something like that, are you like, thank you, that's so lovely, or are you like, what are you up to? I don't know how you think about a statement like that, but I think Sarah was, what are you up to? Abraham's like, you know, you are so beautiful. And then he carries on and he says, you are so beautiful that I think when we get to Los Angeles, actually Egypt, but same. When we get to Egypt, the ruler of Egypt is going to notice your beauty, and he is going to want you for his wife. So I have a plan. Now at this point, if I was Sarah, which I'm trying to put myself in her shoes, if I was Sarah, I would be going, I would be imagining what this plan would be. And I would think, well, the plan would probably be something like, I'll tell you what, I'll build a place for you just outside of Egypt so you don't have to go in. I'll leave with you 20 of my strongest men. They'll look after you. And I'll go into Egypt myself so that you are protected. I mean, wouldn't you think something, that would be a good plan? That makes sense. You know what Abraham does? He goes, so here's my plan. When they see you and they see that you are so beautiful, can you just tell them that you're my sister, not my wife? And Sarah's like, eh? And he's like, because if you tell them you're my wife, they'll kill me so that they can have you. So if you tell them you're my sister, then that way I can live. And then if I live, I can make lots of money, which is why we're going to Egypt. And if you don't mind, I'll just pimp you out for a few years so that I can go ahead and make money, because if I don't pimp you out, I'll die. They'll kill me. Is that all right, Sarah? This is Abraham, this great icon of faith, pimping out his wife. It's ridiculous. They get to Egypt, and this all happens. Pharaoh hears about this beautiful woman, Sarah, and they go and they find out who is Sarah, and the word, and Sarah is obedient, and she goes, well, I'm the sister of Abraham. And they go, oh, that's cool. You're not married. We'll take you, and we'll take you to Pharaoh. And of course, Pharaoh sees her, and all he can think about is honeymoon night, and he marries her, and the honeymoon night is coming. Well, meanwhile, Abraham is doing his thing, and he's kind of happy about what's going on. And just on honeymoon night, God strikes not just Pharaoh. This is a cool story. Read it in Genesis 12. It's not a bedtime story if you're under the age of 12. But God strikes Pharaoh with a disease. And I'm just imagining what the disease might be, given it was honeymoon night. And Pharaoh gets hit with the disease, but not just Pharaoh, but all the men in Egypt. And you can just imagine Pharaoh's just walking, he's thinking good times, happy thoughts, and all of a sudden, he got a disease. And it's itchy. And he's like, hey, what is going on? And he says to the men, what is going on? And the men, they're like, we're all the same. We're feeling the same thing, man. I don't know what's going on. And they make inquiries, and somebody finds out that this woman is married to a prophet of Almighty God, Yahweh. And Pharaoh goes, what? What? And he goes to Abraham and he says, listen, take your wife. Why did you do this to me? What have I done to you? Take your wife. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give you money. I'm going to give you slaves. I'm going to give you cattle. I'm going to give you everything just so that you can get out of here and leave me alone. And hopefully, because of all the things I've given you, that your God would be appeased and the disease can be lifted. And that's exactly what happens. And so Abraham was like, well, that was a cool scheme. That was a cool scheme. I really made out of that one, because he leaves Egypt a wealthy, wealthy man. But there's a lesson to learn here. See, he went to Egypt not in obedience to God. He went to Egypt out of his own idea. And he came away seemingly blessed. And here's the thing I want us to learn. There are times in your walk with God where you will disobey him and you will seemingly be blessed. But I can almost guarantee from my reading of the word that every time it seems like you're blessed out of a disobedience to God, the blessings turn into a curse. Because here's what happens. A wee while later, Abraham and Lot have a massive issue. Because there's so many sheep, there's so many possessions, there's so many shepherds that there's not enough land to share it, and now he has a headache. What seemed to be a blessing has now become a headache. Fast forward a few years. One of the women that came with Abraham from Egypt as a gift from Pharaoh, which seemed like a blessing, was a woman by the name of Hagar. Hagar became a concubine to Abraham, and a concubine is like friends with benefits. And they had a son called Ishmael. And Ishmael became the father of the Arabs. And today, 4,000 years later, there's still massive issues between Jewish people and Arab people. And what seemed like a blessing 4,000 years later is proving to be a curse. And if Abraham could have seen that when he made his way down to Egypt without God's instruction, he might have done something a bit different. So now we're in this story with Abraham and Lot. Abraham and Lot. They're standing in, can we go to the next slide now, please? They're standing in this place. They're having massive arguments about their herds, and their herdsmen are having massive arguments. They're about to have a civil war in the family because there's not enough pasture. And they're staying in a place called Mamre, near to Hebron. And they're looking out over the land, and Abraham says to Lot, listen, we can't keep fighting like this. You choose where you would like to go, and if you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. Which is pretty amazing, because Abraham was the one with all the power. Abraham had the status. Abraham had all the rights. Lot was a bit of a freeloader. But Abraham gives Lot the choice. Imagine that. This is the paradox of power. You hold a scepter in one hand, but you hold a bowl in the town, the humility of that in the other. And this is what Abraham is practicing, this paradox of power. And Lot has a look, and he looks down towards the Jordan Valley. And the Bible says that what Lot beheld was this land that was just as beautiful as, guess what? The Garden of Eden. It was lush, it was beautiful, it was fantastic. And straight away Lot, being, I guess consumerism being upper mind, saw the advantage, and he said, I'll go down to the Jordan Valley. And Abraham goes, sweet, you go down there, I'll sink back into the hilly, sparse country of Hebron, and I'll live there. Well, so Lot does it. And it doesn't take long before entropy sets in for Lot. You know what entropy is? Entropy is this, like the scientific law, and I'm going to be really basic with it. Like if there's scientists out there, you'll be going, oh, that's only like 1% of it. But the 1% that I know of entropy is that everything always moves from a state of order to disorder. Everything will always move from a state of order to disorder. And Lot starts on this road to entropy. He starts outside of Sodom, he's in the pastures, but before long he's living in Sodom and Gomorrah, surrounded by what was going on there. He saw fit to place his kids in that situation, and he pays dividends for that. I mean, he pays a big price for doing that later on in the story. But when consumerism is top of mind, things like family and things like where you're living and things like what situations you're in for your family are second, not first. And this is what it was for Lot. And so he's there. Well, in those days, if you're a Mesopotamian king and you wanted to conquer Egypt, you would go, well, I need to build up my money, I need to build up my bank so I can have heaps of money, so that I can have heaps of soldiers and heaps of chariots. And one way that I might do that is I might go around the Fertile Crescent, drop into Canaan, and make all those underdeveloped nations who are actually really wealthy and who are gaining, their civilizations are growing, I'll make them pay me money. And here was the deal. This guy, Shedadadaloma was his name, he was the king of Elam, and he drops into Canaan, and he says to the guys in the Jordan Valley, the kings of the Jordan Valley, including Sodom and Gomorrah, he says, I won't beat you up if you pay me money. A simple deal. I won't annihilate you if you just pay me money. And they say, yeah. And for 12 years, that was a great deal. And for 12 years, they pay money. Got to the 13th year, and these kings in the Jordan Valley and Sodom and Gomorrah and 3 other towns, they said, you know what? We're big enough, we're bad enough, we have our own armies, we're not paying you any money anymore. And Shedadaloma goes, really? And he grabs 4 of his king mates, and he comes down with his army of probably around 30 to 40,000 foot soldiers, and he wastes all the kings of the Jordan Valley, including Sodom and Gomorrah. And they took prisoners with them, and Lot and his family were included in these prisoners that were taken. Those that survived ran towards where Abraham was staying, and the story got to Abraham that these kings had come, they had taken Lot and his family, and they were now captive, and Abraham is straight away like, you know what? I got to rescue that dude. I don't know how many of you would think about rescuing a loser. I don't know how many of you would think about or putting your own life at risk to rescue someone who really didn't deserve it. But Abraham, without a thought, goes, I'm going to rescue him. Now remember, this is 5 kings and Abraham. Abraham has 318 servants. that he's kind of trained with a bit of sword fighting. And he goes, boys, you ready? We're going to go chase those 5 kings from Mesopotamia, and we're going to waste them, and we're going to grab back all those people. And you know what? That night he sets out and he chases them down, and he finds them. They're all having a party over this great victory that they've had. And Abraham separates his 318 men at night time, and they attack these guys from all different angles. And these guys who are half drunk, who have left their weapons lying all over the place, freak out. And it's an amazing battle that is won by 318 men versus maybe 30, 40,000 strong army. Amazing. And I fast forward a few hundred years, and I think I know where Gideon got his ideas from. Maybe he read the story. But he does this. And then because here's the thing. If you've been rescued, how should you respond to it? You know how Lot responded? Instead of going back to his best days that he had with God, which was back with his uncle Abraham, which was back in Mamre, which was back in Hebron, he went back to Sodom. And we read in Genesis 18 and 19 that not only did he go back to Sodom, but he actually sat on their city council. So he got worse. He got rescued, and then he went back to his sin, and he got more into it. And we know this because when the angels come, he's sitting at the gate, and we know the type of people that sit at the gate. They're the judges. They're the guys that run the place. They always sit at the gate. And Lot was one of them, right into it. Where did Abraham go after rescuing Lot? He went back to the place where he had his best days with God. He went back to the place where God made the promise and spoke promise into his life. That's where he went back to. And I just have a challenge for you this morning out of this story. And it's about rescue. And my challenge is this. Will you let God rescue you? Because here's why this is really important. You see, Abraham rescued Lot. Lot must have seemed like a real loser to Abraham by now, because he had gone back to Sodom and now he was on the city council. And Abraham's just like, wow. And as the story goes on, things get worse for Lot. He gets rescued from Sodom and Gomorrah, and what God does there, yeah, we know that. But later on in the story, not long after that, he commits incest with his daughters. And through his daughters, he has 2 sons. One's name is Ammon, who became the father of the Ammonites, and the other's name is Moab, who became the father of the Moabites, who become lifelong enemies of Israel. And I think if Abraham could have seen that, he might have gone, why did I rescue this guy? I should have left him to die. Why did I do that? But if we fast forward a few hundred years, the Moabites become a people. And a few hundred years later, there's a lady by the name of Naomi who travels with her husband and her 2 sons over to Moab. And her 2 sons marry 2 Moabite women. And then they die, and her husband dies, and it's a really sad place for Naomi. Now she's a widow, and her plan is to go back to Israel and be the lowest of the low. No one to take care of her. And one of the women that marry one of her sons, her name is Ruth. And she says, you know what? I'm going to rescue you, Naomi. I'm not going to let you go back to Israel to be a widow all by yourself. I'm going to come with you. And Naomi says no, and then that famous thing that Ruth says, hey, your God will be my God, your people will be my people. Where you live, I will live. And she goes back. You know, Ruth meets Boaz, and they get married, a wealthy Jewish man. And they have a son, and his name is Obed. And Obed has a son, and his name is Jesse. And Jesse has a son, and his name is David, the greatest king that Israel has ever had. Fast forward 1,400 years, and a relative in the line of David, his name is Joseph, and he meets a young girl called Mary, and he betroths her. And God sees it fit to bring Messiah of the whole world through Mary. And if Abraham could have seen that, he would have rescued Lot 1,000 times over. And I just wonder when we think about God rescuing you, or maybe when you think about whether or not to stop praying for somebody that you've been praying for a long time and it's not working and they're still in that loser situation. Here's what I want you to really think about. When God rescues you, he doesn't just rescue you, he rescues the legacy that is lying within you. This legacy that you don't know about yet, but he rescues the legacy that's lying within you. That person that you're praying for, maybe it's that son or that daughter that you're praying for. Never stop praying for them, because God will not only rescue them, but he will rescue the legacy that lies within them. And that is worth celebrating. It's worth celebrating a God who rescues not just you, but your legacy that you don't know about yet. If Abraham only knew that Lot would be in the line of the coming Messiah, he might have been a bit more excited about his nephew Lot. I just want to encourage you with that. And how should you celebrate once you're rescued? Here's my final point. Here's how I think you should celebrate. You should go back to the place where you had your best day with God. And if you just think about that right now, like, when did I have my best day with God? What was it? Where was I? What was I doing? What was the situation where I had my best day with God? Yeah, we asked the musicians and singers to come, because we're going to praise God as a response to this message after this. What was I doing when I was having my best day with God? I want to encourage you to go back to that place. That's how you should celebrate. And it also works not just for God, but it also works for your relationships. Maybe you're struggling in your relationships. Maybe you're struggling with your spouse. And if you are in that situation, you should ask yourself the same question. When was it that I had my best day with him? When did I have my best day with her? And maybe we need to go back there. Because you see, that's what Abraham did. He went back to the place where he had his best day with God, and he built an altar to God, and he worshiped there. When God rescues you, he's rescuing the legacy that is in you. And the way to celebrate that is to go back to that place where you had your best day with God, and build an altar there, and worship there, and stay there, and listen for his voice again there. Rescue. God is a God of rescue. And he's a God that celebrates rescuing. And we read about in Revelation that one day, the whole of the universe and the multitudes that are too many to count will stand before the throne, and they'll sing a victory song because of God's ability to rescue the legacy that is in each and every one of you. Go back to that best day that you had with God and worship him there and build your altar there. Shall we stand and sing together? We'll just sing a couple of songs, man, just in response to God's beautiful plan.